One specific occasion where we were actually diving beneath a major construction project, and as we were diving along, the entire cave was literally shaking as we were diving through it. And it wasn't until the next day that we came back that we realized that they had been perforating through the ceiling of the cave, and along one of the lines that Steve had laid the previous day, there was actually a cement piling going right down through the cave system.
New construction could inadvertently block or pollute the great underground rivers of the Yucatan, with far-reaching effects still too complex for us to understand. The Maya underworld faces a new chapter in its long and varied history. The decline of the ancient Maya could teach us a thing or two. Some say they developed too far too fast. Others, that a succession of droughts left them without water. Everyone here still relies on the underworld. It is and always was the lifeblood of the peninsula. Without it, the Yucatan would be a hot, dry, and hostile place. By mapping the course of every river to the sea, Sam and other divers are hoping to draw attention to them, so further damage can be avoided. Their work has not only helped us understand the Yucatan's past, but it can help to safeguard its future. Sam's journey down this river is nearly over. There's more light and more air, and the roots are roots of mangroves. And there are manatees. These gentle herbivores come to the underworld's outflow to drink fresh water and to cool off. What they mean to Sam is that he's made it. One last tunnel. And a journey that began in a jungle pool ends up off a Caribbean beach. Tomorrow he'll be back in the forest, looking for a new cenote and the next river. And when all the cenotes are explored and all the maps are finished, maybe the Yucatan will be better understood.
In 1992, George Smoot made the announcement that the team he led had detected the long-sought variations in the early universe that had been observed by the COBE DMR, NASA's COBE, the Cosmic Background Explorer. This is a satellite that mapped the intensity of the radiation from the early Big Bang and found variations so small they had to be the seeds on which gravity worked to grow the galaxies, clusters of galaxies, and clusters of clusters that are observed in the universe today. These variations are also known as relics of creation. Professor Smoot is an author of more than 200 science papers and has also published the scientific book Wrinkles in Time that elucidates cosmology and the COBE discovery. As founder and director of the BCCP, a cutting-edge cosmological research and education center, Dr. Smoot also leads the Global Teachers Academy, where high school teachers and students from Paris and Berkeley learn about...
I recommend you see it, but we did have the world premiere in Mexico City in 2009, and so since then you should, if you get a chance, get the opportunity to see that, and you'll see the whole history of the Mayans' concept of how they came into existence, and what the role the Great Ball Court, which is not so far from here, played in it, and how the twins defeated the gods and established the Mayans and allowed them to have what goes on today. And it's a very interesting story. But so though I didn't get to come here in person, I got to visit virtually and see the final product. Unfortunately, in the budget cutting to make the planetarium show, which now makes money, they cut the people who could run the simulated show. So we have all of Chichen Itza in the computer, but we just can't show it anymore. So, but anyway, that's a side issue. Hopefully that will be recovered at some point. Okay, so I'll remind you what they said, and make you jealous that people used to get to walk up and down those stairs, even though it's pretty steep and dangerous. The Mayans tinkered with the calendar, and they did a lot of things, and you heard from the previous speaker how the calendar actually got shifted a little bit over time. But the basic calendar was a 52-year cycle, and what that meant, there were nearly 19,000 unique days, which can chronicle a person's life, but many people will be born someplace not at the boundary, so that you'd need a couple of the basic calendars in order to do it. But the Mayans were very interested in, very focused on the fact that there were cycles they observed in the sky, and we'll talk about that briefly in a minute. And so they thought everything was cyclic, so they had a calendar that eventually had a long count, which is the 5,126 years, with the starting point, which people think is equivalent to August 11th and 3114 BC, which on the Gregorian calendar, because you have to talk about which calendar. And so on the Julian calendar or the astronomical calendar, it's a year later, September, a year later. But anyway, the implication is that the end of this cycle is around 2012. It's around now, but the transition into the end of this world cycle, into the new world cycle of precision cosmology, is only roughly around now. But we're here celebrating it now because the 12s came up on the board. It was like the zeros coming up in 2000, where 2001 was the beginning of the century. 2000 was much more fun to celebrate. So that's what we're here. So, all right, for the quiz, did you notice the star rising? Have you looked up away from the lights and looked up and see the stars rising? Did you notice a relationship to the Castillo? If you were watching, some of us, at least where I was sitting, you could just barely see the star at the edge of it, and now you see it going up. Did you notice any relationship between the arc the star is making and the building itself? So if you looked carefully, you will see the star is rising straight parallel to the face. The face that the stair or the snake comes down, which on the equinox has the serpent that crawls down. And it has to be that way. You had to have made the building in that way so that on the solstice you would actually get the light creeping down the stairs one after another as the sun rose or sun set, so that you would eventually come down and connect to the head, because it has to be lined up exactly east-west. And so you can ask yourself, how could the Mayans know that? And then how could they build a building lined up east-west? And they built on previous knowledge, and they did just what we do, which is they have built very careful machines, in this case buildings, like here in the Caracol, which I'll talk about in a minute, which allowed them to make more and more precise observations, and then make more observations over time and record exactly, count the days and count the events to things recycled. So the Mayans had already inherited the knowledge and built it themselves. They knew that the stars make this big arc across the sky going east to west, or west to east, depending on which way you think the things are going. And they also noticed that the sun's track in the sky made that kind of an arc, but it moved north and south in the sky over the period of the seasons. And so they understood that there were special days when the sun would be lined up in a certain way, either the solstice or, in the case of the equinoxes, which there would be the special cases. But in order to build the tools to measure that more and more precisely, or to have the ceremonies to celebrate it, they actually had to build this building with incredible accuracy, right? And they're not the only ones. You'll notice the pyramids were lined up quite that way. But you also know they have a limited data set because they didn't really understand about the precession and equinox, right? Which is a more 26,000 year period, which there's some hints that they had an idea about it, but that's longer than the database for which they were working. But the key issue is they were building on previous knowledge to construct new devices that allow them to make the more precise measurements so they could.
So, what they were doing, the Mayan, was building an infrastructure that connected with a gamma ray light, and this will activate the whole infrastructure, and it would also activate the relics that they already had in stones to make the synchronicities positive every time the reptilians kept damaging their surroundings. So what the Mayans essentially had an infrastructure that would counterattack any negative synchronicities. So, or any, let's say, any weather or anything that's coming towards them, it'll just filter through the relics that are painted in the stone that came from the calendar that they built, also in reference of the light that came from the sun and the moon and the stars. So they were astronomical engineers, and it's beautiful. But I think it's funny how this guy doesn't say any of that. I'm sure he knew. He just, it wasn't convenient for him to say it in this moment.
Build and refine their calendar and make it better. And that's a very similar kind of thing that we do today.
And they did make it better.
The Caracol building, so in the picture in the top left, what you see here's the pyramid and here's the Caracol, which is the other major observatory, which astronomers know to be the observatory because it's the round dome-ish kind of shape. But part of that is
the people that killed the Mayans and my ancestors stole all of this knowledge and kept it to themselves, and now they build buildings and they use the same knowledge, except instead of using it for good, they use it for bad. Especially the adrenochrome of the melanated people. They feed the demons while building this infrastructure. So they're using the infrastructure that was once meant for good, and they're using it for bad. That's why every time I see documentaries of other nations coming to know about these things, I'm always skeptical on what they're going to use the knowledge for.
To the ruin, because if you actually go and look at it carefully, you'll see it was actually a cylinder. But you'll notice they built the building very specially. They built it so they could measure the summer solstice. So this building has stairs for the number of days, and it also is lined up to celebrate the equinoxes and so forth. But the Caracol was designed to see the summer solstice and also the northern Venus setting, right? So they actually had a double use for this building. And they were using Venus, one, because it was a bright object in the sky, and two, because it happened to be, its timing happened to be correlated with the rainy season, which told them when Venus got to a certain point, that was time to plant your crops, the beans or the whichever kinds of things that you were needing to do. And so this building had an outer part which was designed to see the sol.
Yes, because the Mayans knew that certain crops would grow better at night with the moonlight. You can grow and filter certain things at an intensifying way at night with the moonlight, because have you noticed sometimes the moon is brighter than other days? Well, that's when you want to take advantage. It's the same reason why you're supposed to cut your hair only on a full moon and never any other day throughout the year.
Solstice and also and the northern Venus setting, and the winter solstice and the summer sunrise solstice, right? The building is set up like that. So if you actually went by that building, look carefully, you will see there were external features and internal features that allow that to work out. And the thing that I hadn't seen before, but I saw today, was up in the top, there's actually a little cubby hole which looks a lot like the prime focus at the 200-inch telescope. And in the bad old days, and astronomers had to crawl into a cold cage and hang up there motionless in the middle of the night, because if you moved around, it would shake the mirror. It's a tradition that's been going on for a couple thousand years here. Okay, so when you were looking at the pictures and you're looking at this thing, realizing these stairs, this entranceway, and so forth, actually had astronomical meaning. And there's an observer up here, but there's observers out these doors. And so let me show you the other sort of setting on this building, where the focus was on Venus, where there are various places to stand and edges. If you go there, there's little places marked in there, so that when you look out, you see the sunset at equinox, You see the northernmost point of Venus. There's little places marked where you go and see, and you look out through the windows and through the edges, and you will actually see these things. And because there's little edges and marks, it's much easier for you to make the measurements and see what's going on. And so this is the Mayan symbol for Venus. And
So that part on the corner, on the top corner, where there's a pink background, that would basically be the relic for this alignment of building over the top.
this is the god known as, there was a symbol for Venus. But this shows you that sort of the principles of rational reasoning and building the foundation for science have been around for a very long time. The scientific method, we think, is a relatively new invention, but in fact people were working and building and doing these kinds of things, and it's very similar to the kind of things we do now to build our new
Aztec
tools.
Empire. It's time we take a closer look at its crown jewel, the massive capital of Tenochtitlan. This marvel of Mesoamerican urban development is woefully underappreciated, and it will be my goal today to get you acquainted with its amazing story and layout. Tenochtitlan was founded in 1325 upon an unclaimed marshy island in Lake Texcoco. According to legend, the very spot was marked by the god Huitzilopochtli, who had told the Mexica tribe to seek out an eagle perched on a prickly cactus. A second city was also founded 13 years later by a group of dissident Mexica who set up camp on a twin island just a few hundred meters to the north. This second location would become known as Tlatelolco. At first, both settlements were quite unremarkable, as there were meager building supplies in the area, and people had to survive off the local flora and fauna of the lake. However, due to their position, they could exploit waterborne travel to grow as raiders and traders. Over the decades, the two population centers were able to expand thanks to extensive drainage and construction projects, such as the famed Chinampas.
And don't forget the underage caves.
Due to their close proximity, though, the two groups were quite closely intertwined, and often worked, traded, and fought together. During the uprising of 1426, both Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco would lock arms to take on the city of Azcapotzalco, along with their other two allies in the Triple Alliance. During the following years of the Aztec Empire, both cities would get their share of tribute, plunder, and economic activity that would cause them to expand rapidly. While growth would see their cityscapes merge, the two did seek to preserve their own identity. A quick comparison would reveal that Tenochtitlan had the greater area and population, though Tlatelolco had by far the largest market and main temple. Another further distinction would be their individual rulers, as both cities maintained separate governments. For context, here are both of their royal lineages side by side. You'll note that the Tlatelolco line ends in 1473. This is due to the fact that a family quarrel between rulers escalated into open conflict and saw Tenochtitlan emerge victorious and assert its dominance over Tlatelolco. Thus, from then on, the two cities would formally be joined up until their conquest in 1521 by the Spanish and their allies. Let's now turn to the details of the cityscape itself. This can be a bit overwhelming, so let's first begin by looking at things from a macro level before zooming in to deal with the specifics. To put things simply, the city was located on an island on the western edge of Lake Texcoco and was connected to the mainland by 5 great causeways. It covered 13 square kilometers and was laid out in a dense grid of canals, roads, and buildings. The city was divided into 4 quarters known as campan. These were then further subdivided into 15 or so districts known as calpoli. Each of these districts held commoner families led by a set of nobles, with their own marketplace, temple, and school. With this framework in mind, let's now begin filling in the details of the city. We can begin with the most important ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan, the sacred precinct. This walled area encapsulated a wide plaza holding about a dozen important structures. Dominating the center was the 60-meter-tall, twin-peaked Great Temple, with a blue shrine dedicated to Tlaloc, and a red shrine dedicated to Huitzilopochtli. In front of it lay the round temple pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. A variety of other temples, a ball court, and even a school for nobles were arrayed around the remaining ground of the sacred precinct. Just outside the walls were a host of other important buildings used to run the city. These included palaces, homes for dignitaries, marketplaces, and yet more temples. At this point, we would be remiss to skip over some of the incredible features of Moctezuma II's palace, which included a botanical garden, an aviary, a zoo, and even an aquarium. Spanish chroniclers report that the botanical garden contained a
Look at those beautiful relics.
great many trees, sweet-scented flowers, and aromatic herbs,
Yeah, I'm sure they were prettier than that.
which were a pleasure to stroll besides. The aviary is said to have had 10 rooms housing many colorful species and birds of prey. The zoo featured jaguars, pumas, foxes, and snakes, amongst hundreds of other exotic animals, while the aquarium housed yet more creatures in the form of salt and freshwater fish located in separate ponds. This is truly something that must have been incredible to behold. Radiating out from the cluster of buildings around the sacred precinct were 4 major roads. The east led to the docks of Tetamozalco, while the north, south, and west led to the great causeways of Tacuba, Iztapalapa, and Tepeyac, leading to the mainland. These were built to accommodate heavy traffic and were so wide that the Spanish noted you could fit 10 horses side by side. Along each of these major highways were located many of the larger city buildings with a series of gates and drawbridges located at the entrances to the city. Co-located with the causeways were also aqueducts, which brought in fresh water from springs on the mainland. These were lined with terracotta bricks and came in paired ducts, such that repairs could take place on one or the other in order to minimize total downtime. I'll also note that water management was a huge focus for the Aztecs, and something they excelled at. As a prime example, the 17-kilometer-long dike of Nezahualcóyotl separated the fresher western Texcoco from the more brackish eastern Texcoco, while also contributing significantly to the dike system for regulating water level around the city. Another important landmark to point out is to the north, in Tlatelolco. As was stated before, it had once been its own city, and therefore still contained many of the same plazas, temples, and palaces as its southern neighbor. But what really stands out is the marketplace of Tlatelolco, which was the largest in the American continent. Cortez reports that it could hold as many as 60,000 people. These buyers and sellers would go about their business in an immense open-aired market with goods organized by areas and rows. One might find corn, tomatoes, feathers, rare animal pelts, musical instruments, fine cloth, and even bottled fresh water, amongst other things. These were bartered for using cacao, cotton cloaks, and gold-filled feather quills.
How can a civilization so advanced have the need to sacrifice their own people? This is how I know that this piece of information of supposedly my ancestors sacrificing our own people, I know it's BS. Because by saying this lie, you won't have to explain the technological infrastructure that the Aztec and the Mayans had in order to not have to do those things. Their infrastructure thrived and activated with the gamma ray light because they found the perfect relics that were attracted to this, meaning they didn't need to sacrifice anything. Everything that they lived and thrived on was holy light. And what this government does now is use their technological infrastructure for satanic reasons, and they, which is this, the bad guys, they do have to sacrifice children from the people that they steal from sanctuary cities. That is their idea. So I just wanted to say that. Continue.
There would have been a ton more to explore in the city, but for now we will have to fill up the remaining blanks with some high-level commentary. You can imagine that much of the rest of the cityscape was filled with canals, bridges, streets, squares, markets, temples, workshops, and residences. You'd find tons of homes traditionally built of adobe walls and thatched roofs. Colorful frescoes and other decorations filled one's vision with color, while countless people going about on foot and by boat breathed life into the scene. These included farmers, fishermen, merchants, nobles, priests, craftsmen, soldiers, and more. For context and the sheer level of activity, the population at its peak is estimated to have been in excess of 200,000 individuals, with the surrounding small towns pushing the total closer to 300,000. This is astounding, and must have been particularly impressive to the Spaniards, as the sheer scale of Tenochtitlan rivaled many of the largest contemporary European cities such as Paris. At this point, I also want to clear up a misconception about the Mesoamericans. Often they are imagined as being largely made up of unsophisticated tribes scattered across the jungles. In reality, theirs was a civilization of centralized city-states with impressive levels of development. After all, Tenochtitlan was just one shining jewel among many. It's hard to wrap my head around what a sight this all must have been to behold. I'd love to talk more about the various details of Tenochtitlan and other Mesoamerican cities, but for now, this is where we will leave things. I look forward to...
Hernán Cortés y sus huestes llegaron a las costas de Veracruz. Hernán Cortés era un hombre apasionado, inteligente, audaz, atrevido. Era de pensamiento renacentista, un hombre que sabía leer y seguramente había leído libros de historia, y esto dice que soñó en su ambición ir más allá de llegar a las costas de México. Se trasladó con sus fuerzas guerreras, cruzando pueblos, valles, montes, hasta llegar a la ciudad de México Tenochtitlan, donde fue recibido el día 8 de noviembre de 1519 por Moctezuma. Moctezuma era un hombre supersticioso, muy creyente en sus divinidades y en sus costumbres, que creyó que realmente venía Quetzalcóatl. Salió a recibirlo con su séquito, entre hombres nobles y principales. Entre ellos iba Cuitláhuac, el señor de Coyoacán, el señor de Texcoco y además el señor de Matlatzinco, Atlicatzin. Moctezuma los llevó a hospedarse a los recintos en el que él vivía, y al poco tiempo lo tomaron preso. Hernán Cortés siempre tenía la pretensión de ir más allá de una conquista, y entonces comenzó a utilizarlo para presionar sus pretensiones. Pero en esos días le avisaron sus informantes que se aproximaba Pánfilo de Narváez, que lo había enviado Velázquez, el gobernador de Cuba. Y entonces lo que hizo Hernán Cortés fue salir a su encuentro y lo derrotó. Hizo que Pánfilo de Narváez se uniera a las fuerzas de Hernán Cortés. Mientras tanto, en la ciudad dejó Alvarado, y en un arrebato de miedo, de soberbia, ejecutó a varios hombres que tenían una ceremonia dancística, y entre ellos varios señores principales. El pueblo se enfureció y arremetió contra los españoles. Y entonces, pues yo en esos días, Hernán Cortés, mirando la situación, pues obligaron a que Moctezuma diera la cara. Pero el pueblo enfurecido, dicen el imaginario colectivo, que le aventaron una piedra y lo hirieron y murió. Las crónicas dicen otra cosa, que los españoles lo ejecutaron, le dieron una puñalada. Como sea, la ciudad de México Tenochtitlan se había quedado sin el tlatoani, sin el señor principal. Alguien tenía que responder como principal gobernante de la ciudad. Y en ese entonces Atlicatzin que era Tlacateca, que significa que era un guerrero de alto rango. Seguramente fue propuesto, ahí está documentado. Se casó con Tecuixpo, su sobrina, que el matrimonio fue un matrimonio simbólico, ya que ella era menor, una niña. Justamente en ese ínter y ante la crisis de lo que aconteció, después de la llamada Noche Triste, donde los españoles salieron huyendo. Salieron huyendo con caballos, con sus aliados, cruzando los puentes, las acequias, y atrás iban todos los guerreros, las canoas que en su entorno los asediaban. Los españoles, en su ambición, quisieron llevarse los tejos de oro que habían fundido de todas las reliquias, y muchos de ellos perecieron en las acequias. Al final, Hernán Cortés alcanzó salir, y en Tlacopan, a la salida, junto a un árbol, según se cuenta, se dice que allí lloró su derrota. Y por eso se llama la Noche Triste, y ocurrió el día 30 de junio de 1520. La gloriosa batalla para los mexicas y la amarga derrota.
So this is supposed to be an altar or drawing depicting Cortés crying the defeat of the Spaniards from the Aztecs. The first defeat, because at the end the Aztecs lost, but the first defeat, Cortés went to go cry on a tree. And on that day, it was June 30th. So
Españoles.
De mi alma va volando mi fe, es la fuerza que